Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are challenging ourselves to read through all 1,775 poems contained within the Thomas H. Johnson edition of the Complete Poems of Emily Dickinson. And now we turn to poem 275, Doubt Me, My Dim Companion. That opening line, by the way, will sound similar to the opening lines of 268. Me change, me alter. It's a rhetorical device where it's clear that what she's actually saying is, you should not doubt me, my dim companion. The word dim is going to be a fascinating word, and who this poem is to is also going to be the subject of some speculation. Scholars believe maybe Sam Boyles is being referenced here. Whoever it is, it's fairly evident from the tone of this poem that Emily has been somehow questioned, maybe even slighted, for her lack of fidelity or loyalty. And this is a sting that we have seen a few times already in several of these, what I'll call questioning poems, or challenging poems, we might say in some way, where she's kind of challenging back. When this poem was published in 1890, it was actually called Surrender, and I'm going to challenge you to try and come up with a reason why you think this poem was called Surrender. Now, our assumptions, let's get those out of the way, are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down the left-hand side, Chats with Emily, a playlist. I'm hopeful you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful you've read the previous 274 poems. We just finished with 274, The Only Ghost I Ever Saw. And if you have, then you know that we're playing a game here in this poem that we have heard before. Poem 246, do you remember this one? Forever at his side to walk, the smaller of the two. Brain of his brain, blood of his blood, two lives, one being now. Forever of his fate to taste, if grief the largest part, if joy to put my peace away for that beloved heart. All life to know each other, whom we can never learn, and by a change called heaven, wrapped neighborhoods of men, just finding out what puzzled us without the lexicon. This notion that she is capable of extreme devotion. Now, Wisher will say that this poem is an act of imaginative dramatization, and I think there is some legitimacy to seeing it that way. But I think there's something else also going on here. Emily was completely aware that in religious circles and in religious parlance, if you want to talk about who a good woman is and what she is, then you would immediately turn to the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament and read the 31st chapter, verses 10 through 31, and in which a woman is the perfect, the ideal woman is described. And in the middle of that description, at verses 21 through 25 of the King James Version, which she would have read, this woman, this ideal woman, we are told is, quote, verse 21, not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. Now, I think that these lines are standing behind this poem. Now, obviously, the question is, who is she trying to convince that she is good enough? Some of this poetics will seem to you a bit pathetic, you might even think. Doubt me, my dim companion? Why, God would be content with but a fraction of the life poured thee without a stent, the whole of me, forever. What more the woman can say, quick, that I may dower thee with last delight I own. It cannot be my spirit, for that was thine before. I seeded all of dust I knew. What opulence the more had I, a freckled maiden, whose farthest of degree was that she might some distant heaven dwell timidly with thee. Sift her from brow to bare foot. Strain till your last surmise. Drop like a tapestry away before the fire's eyes. Winnow her finest fondness, but hallow just the snow intact in everlasting flake. Oh, cavalier, for you. Now, again, this is a fascinating poem because we don't know who it's to. Who is the one that is the dim companion being referenced here? Again, some have referenced it as Samuel, some have referenced it, of course, as Sue, and someone else. Whatever is going on here, notice, she's not saying that you should doubt me, but rather, you should not doubt me. Now, why this poem in 1890 was called Surrender, I'm going to leave to you, and we'll speculate at the end, but it's fairly clear the obsequious nature of the language of this poem is self-evident, or is it? I always have to say that because with Emily it's never quite clear what game she's actually playing at, which is why, again, we call our series here Chats with Emily, because we're just speculating. We would love to be able to ask her, dude, what was going on in 275? Who's the dim companion? And why is it that you felt like you had to defend yourself or explain yourself in some way? Doubt me, my dim companion, why, comma, God, comma, would be content. And I think the way to read this is, doubt me, my fit dim companion, why, God would be content. In other words, the stress is on the word God because of her commas, with but a fraction of the life toward thee, without a stent. By the way, this opening line, doubt me, reminds us of the opening lines of 268. Me change, me alter. Again, it's that kind of rhetorical device. And then this, without a stent, is fascinating. Go back or when we get to poem 299, we'll play around with this idea of the stent. Now, of course, many have read into this idea without a stent of a certain kind of sexuality being discussed here. In other words, Emily arguing, I am without a stent, without stain, that is to say, virginal in some way. The whole of me, forever, at the end of the poem, it'll be everlasting. The whole of me, forever, what more the woman can, go back to poem 199 to play the game of that one, the woman can, say, quick, that I may dower thee with last delight I own. In other words, I've given you everything of my dower. I would give you whatever is left. And then a break. It cannot be. It's almost like she's struggling to understand. What is it? What is it that I'm missing? It cannot be my spirit, for that was thine before. Interesting. I seeded, notice all this economic language, dower to seeding and all of that. I seeded all of dust I knew. What opulence the more had I, and then she'll call herself a freckled maiden. Now, this will take us back to poem 166. It will take us forward to poem 401, freckled human nature, she'll use it, whose farthest of degree was that she might some distant heaven dwell timidly with thee. By the way, timidly here, this word timidly only gets used once in all of her poetry. And it's here. However, we've commented that in 77 poems the word small is emphasized, and in 172 poems little is emphasized. And again, the idea of child or childlike in 71 poems is emphasized. This notion that Emily is emphasizing how fragile she is, right? And of course, that will take us with freckled maiden as well. And then finally, sift. So notice we go from stent, without a stent, to sift her. And again, it's economic language, it's the language of culinary, it's sift her from brow to bare foot. And barefoot will take us back to poem 274. From brow to bare foot. And again, notice this barefoot here is an adjective acting as a noun, right? Emily loves to play that game. Strain, hear all these S sounds. Sift her from brow to bare foot, exclamation point. Strain till your last surmise. Drop like a tapestry. And now, of course, we're thinking about that Proverbs 31 passage that I read to you. Like a tapestry away before the fire's eyes. Winnow her finest fondness. Again, the F sounds here. But hallow just the snow. And of course, again, taking us to the Proverbs 31 passage. Of course, snow represents integrity. When we get to poem 709, we'll play this game out this way at poem 709. Publication is the auction of the mind of man, poverty, by justifying for so foul a thing, possibly, but we would rather from our garret go white unto the white Creator than invest our snow, thought belong to him who gave it, then to him who bare its corporal illustration, sell the royal air in the parcel, be the merchant of the heavenly grace, but reduced to human spirit to disgrace of price. Well, obviously this is a really important poem when we get to it, 709. But did you hear that? Possibly, but we would rather from our garret go white under the white Creator than invest our snow. Here she says, just the snow. Integrity seems to be the suggestion. Intact, in everlasting flake. We're back to that word forever. And then only time used in all of her poetry, cavalier, he who quibbles, right, for you. In other words, she seems to be suggesting that I'm being somehow misunderstood or falsely accused, and there's quibbling going on over silliness. Again, back to cavalier. When we get to poem 861, we will come back to the tone of this poem, and it will read like this. Split the lark and you'll find the music. Bulb after bulb in silver rolled, scantily dealt to the summer morning, saved for your ear when lutes be old. Loose the flood, you shall find it patent, gush after gush reserved for you. Scarlet experiment, septic Thomas, now do you doubt that your bird was true? Same sentiment. In other words, what is she saying it to a? Well, I think the argument is that it's hard to not feel valued, to not feel respected. She's given everything, she seems to suggest, and maybe her snow is being somehow doubted. Now, are we speaking about her poetry? Are we speaking about herself? It's hard to know. At 2b, note how she uses the language of both the Old and the New, biblical language, Old and New Testament, as we said, and the economics language as well as here. At 3a, well, obviously we mentioned the Proverbs passage and the 861 poem. But now I'll ask you, why was this poem, when published, called Surrender? Some of you will read this as a clearly obvious surrender. Others of you will say, no, we've seen this before with Emily. It's right there in the opening line. I mean, go back to it one more time. Doubt me, my dim companion. Now she uses exclamation points, but it really almost reads as if she's going, doubt me? My dim companion? Again, the word dim, I think, is the key word here. She's like, you're not seeing everything the way you should see it. Finally, at 3b, what was a time you kind of felt this way? That is to say, you felt maybe a victim to cavalier comments, and your companion was a little dim in your estimation. I hope you're enjoying your study. Thank you.